This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Noah Taluki, and on today's episode, the Lions closing their season out on a high note by defeating the mighty Green Bay Packers 37-30. I'll break down the game and talk about what it means going forward for this Lions team and what they need to do in the offseason with free agency and the draft coming up in April as well. Also, the big national championship game, Georgia versus Alabama. Georgia coming away victorious for their first national championship since 1980. I don't want to go through the entire game, but I just want to talk a little bit about what I noticed and maybe a couple of players that could be on the Lions in the future, and why the Big Ten has some catching up to do when it comes to the SEC powers like Alabama and Georgia. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in. As always, hopefully everyone had a great weekend out there. I definitely did, and I had a lot of fun watching football. You know, it's something because, you know, and people who have listened to this podcast, they know I am a student at John Carroll University in east of Cleveland. A grad student, actually, and our graduate assistant in our sports information department. And, you know, when you work in this industry of sports information, you know, you're always working your team's events always. You know, so during the season, I'm always working football games. I'm working all the time on weekends, especially, you know, with football, soccer, and some basketball now. So I don't really get a whole lot of chances to see, you know, these teams. So I don't get a chance to see Michigan all the time, Michigan State. I don't get a chance to see these SEC teams. So really, the last couple of years, I've really treated winter break as a time to catch up on football. You know, that's when I try to watch as many bowl games as I can. I try to watch a lot of these last couple of NFL regular season games. Now, the Lions are a different story. I always have time to watch the Lions because, you know, Sundays I'm not doing as much, and I can carve a little bit of time for Lions. But mostly it's the college football stuff. And I was able to watch the national championship game and, you know, the semifinal games and all that with Michigan and Cincinnati and all them. And, well, you know, like I said, we'll get to a little bit of the game and all that later. But it was a lot of fun watching. And the NFL, you know, the playoffs are going to be coming up this weekend. And what a great game the Raiders and the Chargers was on Sunday night. And it's a lot of stuff I missed throughout the season just because I don't have enough time. So just catching up on winter break is definitely fun. My last week before I go back next week. To John Carroll in Cleveland. All right, I want to talk about this Lions game a little bit. Won't do a total deep dive into the game, but I want to talk a little bit about the free agency and all that coming up a little bit later. But 37-30, Lions defeating the Packers. They will end their season 3-13-1, and you know, a nice performance overall. Jared Goff looking good, 21 of 30. Just under 250 yards, no turnovers, 2 touchdown passes as well. And the Lions were getting a little creative. I mean, you know, Tom Kennedy with that 75-yard touchdown pass to Khalif Raymond. Amon-Ra St. Brown continuing to grow with over 100 yards and a touchdown as well. You know, DeAndre Swift worked his way back a little bit after all those injuries. And, you know, just they really tried to get creative. You know, you saw Jack Fox going for it. On fourth down as he's gone, seems like so many times this season, but was unable to connect with Godwin Igwebuike, one of the backup running backs. But then, you know, the defense got out there, held him to a field goal, you know, so there's definitely some promise. And first of all, I have an announcement to make for all you fans out there that say, you know, the Lions should have lost that game, would have gotten the number 1 overall pick, all that. No. You play to win the game, and I've said that for a long time. You play to win the game, as the great Herm Edwards would say. So I don't want to hear any of this. The Lions should have lost. You know, they had no business winning. Packers had a bunch of backups in. Rodgers was on a snap count. Bakhtiari, the left tackle, was on a snap count. No, I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear any of that. The Lions finished strong. They finished the season strong. They had nothing to play for. This second half of the season, nothing. And what I saw overall, and I have some concern, as I should, as a lot of fans should, I saw Dan Campbell grow as a coach. you saw him earlier in the year, in the middle of the year, he was making some dumb decisions. I mean, that whole Thanksgiving debacle against the Bears, could not have the guys in there on the possession or on the final drive, a whole defensive miscue. It got me concerned. Like, is this going to continue? And there are a couple games in there where there were some coaching mistakes, but really the last 4 or 5 weeks, I didn't see really many, at least glowing, that were very, very noticeable. And and that just shows growth. That shows Dan Campbell has grown. It seemed like he was getting better as a play caller as well. Now, should he remain the play caller? No. They got to go get that offensive coordinator. And by the way, Anthony Lynn fired as offensive coordinator. That was expected. I mean, I don't think there were any fans out there that were very high on Anthony Lynn anyways during the season. I mean, this is a guy that got stripped of his play calling duties halfway through the year. You're a first-year offensive coordinator with the Lions, and halfway through the year, you're getting your play call duties stripped. That's not a good sign at all, as Dan Campbell had to take over. But regardless, a new offensive coordinator will be in store for the Lions, and it's really best. And Dan Campbell said it. It's really best for both of us, both parties, himself and Anthony Lynn, moving forward. So I'm really curious to see what the Lions do at offensive coordinator. You guys know my favorite. It's Joe Brady, the old Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator who worked with Dan Campbell in New Orleans for a couple years when Campbell was there as the tight ends coach. And, this is a guy that really mentored Joe Burrow, the pass game coordinator at LSU in 2019. I think it's a guy that definitely deserves a second chance at the NFL. And I think the Lions should at least look at him and really consider, at least interview him. I know the one candidate right now that some fans and some people, some insiders are really looking at is that Ben Johnson, the tight ends coach right now for the Lions, who was really involved in the pass game, I guess in the second half of the season with Dan Campbell. And a lot of the players really love him, and I was reading something too that they want to have a guy, because there's as we all know, there's a lot of these ex players that are on the staff. Mark Brunell, quarterback coach. Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator. Dan Campbell, obviously himself, a former NFL player. Calvin Shepard. The list goes on and on. Aubrey Pleasant, and they want to have a guy in there that has that little bit of a geeky mind, a little bit of a creative mind that gets away from the player. An ex-player can see the game differently than a guy that studies. And I'm not saying these guys don't study at all, study game film and whatnot, but I think they bring a little bit of a different perspective to the game than just a guy that has just played the game. That's all he's done is play the game, and with a little bit of coaching experience here and there, but. I think that's really why Ben Johnson's kind of a favorite. He brings sort of a different perspective into the passing game, a little bit more of a creative, and maybe a little bit more of maybe a geekier side as well. So I'm curious to see where they go as offensive coordinator. I think it's going to be a big decision moving forward. But I do want to talk a little bit about Jared Goff, and my opinion throughout the whole season, really ever since he started struggling in the first half, was. This isn't the guy. This isn't the long-term future of the Lions. But I think it's very obvious what Goff's strengths and weaknesses are. And I've said it before. I said it a lot during the preseason. How the Lions, I think they need to get a lot of play action going, because Goff really thrives in that play action. And yes, he does. And I was listening to Mike Valeni today on 97.1 The Ticket, and they're talking about how Goff, yes, the thriving off the play action, and how Matt Ryan in 2016, his MVP year, he had somewhere like 35 to 40%, somewhere in there of his passes were off of play action. And it's no coincidence that he had that MVP-like season. Now, am I saying Jared Goff is like Matt Ryan 2016, with all these weapons around him, an MVP? No, I don't think Goff's not even close to being an MVP. But I'm willing to give Jared Goff a second chance. And here's why. I think there was a little bit of injury that bugged him. But I think also, if you have the right pieces around Goff, with the right scheme, with that play action passing, I think he can be a guy that can hold down the ship. Now, like I said, he's not the quarterback of the future, I don't think. I think there's better guys. I think maybe the Lions could be trying to hold off for one more year and then see where these guys land, because next year's quarterback class is supposed to be good. CJ Stroud's supposed to come out, Bryce Young, and who knows who else will come out. There could be another surprise out there because obviously everyone knows this year's quarterback class is not as strong. There's Kenny Pickett, the kid from Liberty, there's Carson Strong. I mean, there's these guys that they're not as strong as some of these other guys they're going to be coming out in the 2023 draft. So I think also too, and we all know that one of the Lions' biggest weaknesses is the receiving game. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the number one guy. He's definitely a big part of the future, no doubt. But they definitely need. I'm not saying a Calvin Johnson-like player, but a guy with sort of his size. Guys like Calvin don't come along that often, but I need a guy that's like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", a dude that you could just throw to in the red zone. Like a number one receiving kind of target, who has some speed as well. And I would love to see the Lions get one of those type of guys in this draft. I was really, really high on Jamison Williams or some of those receivers from Alabama, but unfortunately Jamison Williams hurt his knee. I don't know the extent of that knee injury that he suffered against Georgia in the national championship game, but it's going to be interesting to see how that injury affects his draft stock or not. But we all know the Lions' offensive line could be one of the best in football next year, especially with a healthy Frank Ragnow. Taylor Decker, they'll be getting him back for a whole season. Remember, he was hurt the first couple months of the year. Panay Sewell, a guy that really, has grown as a offensive lineman, a guy that could really be that centerpiece. Really, ever since he was drafted, a lot of people have been high on him as well. Jonah Jackson showed some improvement. Even some of the Lions' backup linemen. I know Matt Nelson had a really tough year to start, but I mean, overall, I thought he did a little bit better of a job when he was called upon later on in the year, and there was Tommy Kramer getting some reps as well. But this is the first time, and I'm thinking about the rushing attack as well. This was the best the Lions have ran the football since Barry Sanders in 1997. Since that year, how long have Lions fans been complaining about how the run game is non-existent? Years. At least as long as I've been a fan, for over 10. Javid Best, he's the next running back. Oh, he's hurt. Mikael LaShore, he bottomed out. All these running backs that they've tried, all this trying to get the running game going, it just never happened. This is the first year where the Lions have had a true running game. And it's too bad that we weren't able to see more of it because the Lions were down in so many games, they were forced to throw the football. So we saw a lot more of Goff and Tim Boyle trying to stretch the ball down the field rather than the rushing attack, even though the rushing attack was the best it's been in 25 years. So I'm excited to see next year how much that rushing attack, how much they can build off of that. And I think DeAndre Swift, great running back. I just really hope he can stay healthy. It'd be interesting to see what Jamal Williams does next year. I would like to see the Lions take a running back in the draft. Doesn't have to be a first pick or whatever. Just, fourth, fifth round guy. And I think the Lions, too, they got to hit on their second round picks. They got to. Second, third round, around there. Bob Quinn, we know, did not pick the right guys in the second and third rounds. He didn't. And let's hope that Brad Holmes and company are able to do that. Because this year's second and third round picks, Levi Onwuzurike and Ali McNeil, not very impressive to start. Now, I'm willing to give him a second chance. Not very impressive on the defensive side of the ball, that's for sure. We know there's a lot of holes on defense. I thought the cornerbacks played decent this year. I'm not going to say they were very, very good, but there was a couple guys with some promise. I mean, Amani Aruarie, there was Jerry Jacobs before he hurt his knee. AJ Parker showed some flash. Afitu Melifonwu. I'm going to be curious. A big thing next year is going to be Jeff Okudah. Is he going to be able to step up, after very subpar rookie year and obviously an injury-plagued season in his second year this year with the torn Achilles? It's a very tough injury to overcome, especially with all that lateral movement as a cornerback. So, they keep saying, hey, he's a hard worker and all that, but let's hope he can really show why he was the number 3 overall pick back in 2020. But I want to see. I want to see the Lions draft some really good players in this draft, being able to get some starters. They got to be starters. They got to be starter material. You can't have a project. You can't draft a project in the first or second round. It can't happen. These guys have to be starters right off the gate. And they're going to be addressing free agency as well. So it's going to be a very interesting offseason. Very interesting. And, don't worry about the wins, guys. I know the NFL is all about wins. You got to have wins. Every team's goal is to win the Super Bowl every year. But for some teams, it's not realistic. The Lions this year, Super Bowl was never realistic. When were people saying Lions are going to go to the Super Bowl, go to the playoffs this year? No. It's all about building. And I think too many times in the NFL, teams get very impatient. They'll fire a guy after a year or two. They're not willing to see it, grow. And I think this regime, and Sheila now as the owner, I think they're very willing to give Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell some time. Next year I want to see 7 or 8 wins. I think that's fair. 7 or 8 wins. Think about, too, if some of those games go a different way, the Lions could have 6 or 7 wins. You think about the Browns game. You think about the Steelers game. You think about the Vikings, the last second field goal. You think of Baltimore. You think of all these games. You think of all these games where this season where it could have been different. And if it was different, Lions have 6, 7 wins, which is even more impressive, given the fact that Matt Patricia, he had 6 wins his first year and nothing his last 2. So, and you got to remember, too, the circumstances starting from complete scratch. Gotten rid of the franchise quarterback in Matthew Stafford, traded him to the Rams for a hefty ransom. Was able to get a lot of picks for that. Remember, Lions have 2 first-round picks this year and 2 first-round picks next year. A hefty ransom, as I like to say. Got rid of the coach, got rid of the GM. A completely new start. And remind you, Chris Spielman hired in the front office as well. So this was a complete break. I don't want to hear, we've been rebuilding since 1957. No. Each regime has to have a clean record. Kind of has to break away from that tradition. You can't say, the Lions, this rebuild's going to fail because of previous history. Each regime has their own chapter in the history. You can't judge previous history based on a new regime. Not yet, at least in the early stages. So it's I'm really, really excited, and we'll keep you posted for sure on how this Lions offseason goes. That is for sure. But a great way to end the season. Great second half. They definitely got better. The defense, there were some games here and there. The Seattle game, the Broncos game, but overall the defense played a little bit better. Goff was playing better football as well. So really, really exciting stuff. That's for sure. All right, I want to talk about this national championship game and sort of some parallels with some Lions stuff, and then also, how Big Ten's got a lot of catching up to do. And I'm going to start off with the game itself. The game was great. And, for Georgia fans, excellent. I mean, since 1980, Vince Dooley, Herschel Walker, that was the last time the Bulldogs won a national championship. And to be able to have the pupil in Kirby Smart beat the mentor, Nick Saban, that's never happened before. A pupil of Nick Saban has never beat him in college. So, that was great to see for Georgia. And, shout out to my uncle who lives in Atlanta. He's friends with a lot of Georgia fans. And, it means a lot to those fans down there. The SEC, as a lot of people know, is just a very, very different animal. And, football is not just something to do down there. It's really a way of life. It's like a religion almost. And, I saw people in the stands crying after the game. It was just, you could just tell it just meant something so special to that Georgia community. It's like a top 10 fan base in the country. So, it's crazy to see. Now, like I said, I don't want to get too deep dive too much into the game. You could tell Georgia really wanted it more in the second half than Alabama did. And I know Alabama was beat up. Jameson Williams got hurt. He didn't return. They were basically relying on those freshman receivers, guys that didn't get a lot of experience. And but Georgia just never quit. And I'm happy for Georgia. Bucking the narrative a little bit with Alabama always winning. Well, Georgia gets a little piece of the pie in the SEC as well. But I think there's a couple of those guys. I know Nakobe Dean. What a great linebacker he is for Georgia. Jordan Davis, just a huge monster there in the middle on defense as well for the Bulldogs. I mean, those are guys that could really, I think, help the Lions. But I could see the Lions getting a linebacker later. I don't know about the first round. Plus, I don't think Dean is gonna slip that far to where the Lions are picking. By the way, the Rams playing the Cardinals. If the Rams lose, the Lions will actually get a better draft pick. But I really want Stafford to win that game. I want Stafford to get a playoff win. Just have that off his back in his illustrious 13-year career. But Dean is a great linebacker, and I know the Lions. They struggled at linebacker. We know that Alex Anzalone is more of a system type guy, and some of those other guys struggled. But I don't think Dean is going to fall. And Jordan Davis he'd be a great guy in the middle. But the Lions just took Aleem McNeil and Onwuzurike. I don't think Davis would be as much of a project, though. I think he already has it, heading into the draft. So, it'll be interesting to see as well. I'm not as familiar with some of the Alabama guys besides the skill wide receivers. Like I mentioned, Jamison Williams is a guy that I think could really, Mechie, another guy who could really help the Lions. But their injuries, I really want to see what happens and what the diagnosis is on them before I think about the Lions drafting these guys at wide receiver. I think those two are two of the best receivers in the draft, along with those guys from Ohio State as well. But I just want to say, so, it made me think, watching the game, two SEC teams in the championship. Georgia didn't even win their conference. They didn't even win the SEC, and they won the national championship. I mean, that just shows how dominant the SEC has been in football. I'm just wondering, is this just going to continue? Are we just going to keep seeing SEC teams in the national championship game? Or is it one of those things where, we're going to, maybe one day we'll see Big Ten teams? Because the only Big Ten team that's had any shot of at least competing for a national championship was Ohio State. And that was 2014. Ohio State is like the only Big Ten school that is sort of on that same level as the SEC in terms of recruiting. And we all know, in college football, it's all about recruiting. Who can get the best athletes? Having a great coach is a big plus as well. But you got to have the athletes, and you got to be able to recruit. Georgia, Alabama, those SEC schools, they know how to recruit. I mean, that's why they're in the top 25 every year. Like 6 or 7 teams seem to be in the top 25 every year in the SEC. Plus, in the next couple of years, it's going to keep growing. Oklahoma's going to the SEC. These more and more teams are starting to come. I believe Texas is joining the SEC as well. So this is just going to be an SEC fest every year. We'll have to see. But I think a big part of it is the coach, though. You think about Alabama, before Nick Saban. And don't get me wrong, Alabama's still a power. They're still one of the best fan bases in the country. They've always been. But Mike Shula. And my buddy Ben, who's cousins with Mike Shula. But Mike Shula, I think it's fair to say it was not the same program with Mike Shula as it is with Nick Saban. I think a lot of that's coaching. They bring Nick Saban in and he's able to recruit. It's not like, Alabama, Georgia can just throw whatever coach in there and they're still going to be great. I think a lot of it has to do with the coach as well. So unless Saban retires, Kirby Smart goes somewhere else, whatever. I don't think Kirby Smart's leaving Georgia. Not at all. And not after delivering their first championship in 40 years. But I just think they're always going to be at that level unless those guys leave. So, Michigan's got to try to get up there. I just wonder what do these Big Ten schools need to do in order to be on this level of the SEC to try to compete for national championships? This isn't, 25, 30 years ago. I just find it interesting. The dominant team, for Florida, in the SEC in the 90s, Florida. Urban Meyer, late 2000s, Florida in the SEC. Now, obviously, Alabama, Georgia. LSU for a little bit as well. Brian Kelly now going to be the head coach over there. But I think the Big Ten has a long way to go. It's just I just think that the Big Ten can't recruit as well as these SEC schools. Now, that's a whole nother conversation as to why and all that. But I think Big Ten's got a long way to go. There's a lot of things that have to be done in order for the Big Ten to compete with the SEC. Because if they can't compete, it's just going to be SEC every year. Big 12's not as strong. You think Notre Dame's going to compete with these guys? Pac-12. What teams are in the Pac-12 that can compete at the national level? The ACC, what, Clemson? That's it. Clemson had a down year this year. So I don't know. It's just because it didn't seem like any of these conferences are even close to what the SEC is. It's just a different animal. As the motto says, as the SEC motto is, everything's just bigger. It's something like that. Everything's bigger in the SEC. It's true. Better recruiting, better facilities, better coaching, better fan bases, better traditions. It's just everything's better in the SEC. And I think the Big Ten and Michigan State and company have a long way to go if they want to compete for national championships. And I think Mel Tucker, he's got a connection in the South. I'm hoping Michigan State can at least try to get there, because I think a lot of obviously the talent in in the nation is in the South, Florida, Texas, down there. And, if Georgia as well. So if Mel Tucker's able to, get his Southern connections, hopefully, Michigan State can at least try to compete. But we'll see. I still think a lot of people are far, far off from competing for championships in the Big Ten. Make sure to tune in to all the other podcasts on the podcast network. Of course, the Fan Report with Michigan, and Doc and Jock, and the Michigan podcast. As I mentioned, the Fan Report talking Pistons as well. So a lot of great content on the podcast network, and also make sure to look at the content that John Macaroon gets out there. I know the Lions just ended the season, and a lot to be expected in the offseason, so make sure to keep continuing reading his content as well. Bringing in the new year, first couple episodes, and there'll be some college basketball to get to as well, and all kinds of other sports. Maybe we'll start talking some Red Wings and Pistons. I know the Pistons just made a big trade for Bol, the son of Manute Bol, the old 7'6" center from Sudan. So thanks again, folks, for tuning in, and make sure to tune in next week only on Open Mic Night.